That's it.
Welcome everybody to Programmes and Resources Committee, 1st of December 2023. And this is starting slightly later because we've had an extraordinary authority meeting this morning as well. Going straight into item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, roll call of members and members' declarations of interest. So apologies for absence. So far we've had Miss Harling, Councillor Gawley and Councillor Heath. If I could ask Karen to do the roll call of members now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, if you can confirm your attendance and any declarations, please. Professor Haddock-Fraser.
Present and no declarations.
Mr Beresford.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Farrell.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Fryer.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Greaves.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Gregory.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Nash.
Present, no declarations.
Mr Smith.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Dr Swetnam.
Present and no declarations.
Mr Thompson.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Warnby.
Present and no declarations.
Miss Witter.
Present and declarations for item 5.
Councillor Woods.
Present and no declarations.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 2 is to...
Chairman,
sorry.
I'm attending in my right as the Chairman of the Planning Committee, so I am here.
Hello, Patrick.
And I have a declaration insofar as it relates to the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan. I have in-laws who have relatives who live on the estate, but I've not discussed that report with them.
Right, thank you very much, Patrick. So we noted that Patrick's attending. Thank you, Karen. Item number 2 is to receive and confirm the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 1st of September. Does anyone have any amendments or corrections to those minutes? Could someone move the recommendation to, thank you, Ken, and seconded by Andrew Gregory. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is urgent business. We have no urgent business, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is public participation, and we have no public participation. So we can move straight into the items for decision, and the first item for decision is item number 5, Championing National Parks for Everyone, National Heritage Lottery Fund application. And can I invite Rachel Lyons to come up to the front to introduce this item. Rachel is an engagement team manager within the authority.
Thank you. Hello everyone, nice to be here again. I'm here to present the paper on Champion National Parks for Everyone. Some people may remember that we talked about this back at the beginning of the year as part of Welcoming Place, and that was to do with the development phase of this project, which was really successful and came to an end during August, and that sort of wound up then. And this paper is to do with the second phase of the project, which is the delivery phase. So the application had gone into Heritage Lottery in August as well. That's building on the success of that development phase and continues with the same group of partners. So Peak District Mosaic is the lead organisation for this bid still. It involves us and the Yorkshire Dales National Park and the North York Moors National Park as delivery partners within that Heritage Lottery Fund application. So you can see in the paper that it set out the Peak District National Park elements of this application that's gone into the Heritage Lottery Fund. The delivery phase builds on what we've done in the past with Peak District Mosaic. It builds on the legacy of things like the Peak District Peak Wise people training that we've done previously in the past, and continues that model of working and developing community champions within urban communities around the national park and within the national park who come forward who are interested in this kind of training. If successful, the project would start in the new year once we hear about the funding, and it would start from April onwards. It's a 2-year project of which the national park element of that in terms of delivery and employment runs for 18 months of the project. So outlined in here, you can see part of our commitment would be an 18-month project officer role, which would be a full-time post, a part-time 10-month traineeship as part of the project, and some roles around facilitation and support around the community champion training. The finances in the project are laid out in the paper. The full cost for the authority is just over 140,000, of which we are making a cash contribution of 5,000 to support the project into the match funding. You can see from this that we've also gone to RMM to discuss the corporate overhead elements of the project and how that relates to both staff and trainees within the project. And there's been some support for Peak District Mosaic about the invoicing elements of this and how we kind of support the cash flow of the project across the 3 national parks to support the charity in running this project. The outcomes of the project you can see are listed here, which has real sort of multiple benefits, both for this is a national park, where we want to go in terms of our diverse audience plan and our work with communities, but also in terms of working with Peak District Mosaic and what the organisation that Peak District Mosaic is before this project started, where it is now in terms of what we've successfully achieved during the development phase, which has been fantastic in terms of now have a new website and all sorts of brilliant things, and where Peak District Mosaic will be in this sector and as a voice in this sector at the end of this delivery phase of the project, which will be transformational for all of us, I think, and the 3 national parks as well. So yes, that's my introduction.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Now, Yvonne mentioned she has a conflict of interest on this item because we're lucky enough within the park to have the chair of Peak District Mosaic sitting as the Secretary of State member. So I've asked Yvonne to just make a comment or two about this before I open it for questions and comments. Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel. I think as Chair of Peak District Mosaic, it's been challenging in the sense that it's been an organisation that we have been developing over the years since 2016, and we've come a long way to be where we are today with the support of officers from this national park and the other officers from the other national park. And another element of it is the support with governance from Derbyshire Dale CVS, notable Neil Molden. So whatever we develop, we have support from them. And having the idea of doing a partnership project stemmed from when we applied for the Green Recovery Fund from DEFRA. And then we had to go to the public funding from the Heritage Lottery. In the development stage, it's recognized that as an organization, we're very small. And for us to be able to lead this, we had to join partnership with national parks, and this was a recommendation from DEFRA, and we took that advice, and we've started working with Sarah, who was the previous engagement manager. And I think what we're doing is strong evidence of how we are improving or encouraging more people to access the national park, making it more accessible for people. And it's not a Sheffield project. It's a project that people access from different parts of the country. We had people coming for walks from London, from Manchester, but mostly from South Yorkshire, especially Sheffield and Rotherham, that people come. And it's a really good legacy to carry on with the model that the Campaign for National Park used from 2008 when I became a champion. And for the National Park to develop that model and did the Peakwise People, where we had more champions. Our aim is to continue working with communities, to develop communities for people to become champions, to be able to access the national park by working with us and promoting what we do to their families and friends and to workplace. People approach us, but we haven't got the funding to be able to manage or support different organizations, but we're working with the national park to create these champions, and these champions will carry on the legacy of the work that we do.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. That's really helpful. Thank you for speaking. Can I open it up to members for any questions or comments? James, then Andy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Yvonne. You know, it's just an exemplary scheme, isn't it? And it's been recognised as such, so credit to all those involved. It's a shame that we have to chase funding regularly to get this going on a consistent basis, because this is something that should happen by right. It shouldn't happen just because there's money, but that's life. And am I right in saying it's just an 18-month? Did you say 18-month project?
It's a 2-year project of which we're delivering for 18 months.
For 18 months, okay. I just wonder, and this might be chancing my arm, but the government's recent announcement about new funding for national landscapes and national parks does identify £2.5 million for children. And I just wondered if we shouldn't be opportunistic and think about maybe once we've landed the HLF money, then seeking to maybe extend the programme more, because I think it does need that long tail. It's fantastic that it survived this long. It's fantastic that it has done the work that it has done. It's just a crying shame that we have to keep on putting out a begging bowl for something that is essential and key to our work. I might be going up the wrong path here by thinking about that 2.5 million fund, but you know, let's consider it at least. But it's just we should support this.
Thank you, James. I'm glad you're saying we should support this, and I don't think there was a question in that, but I think what you're saying is that, you know, hopefully there is more funding coming for other groups, particularly in that case, government support for more children coming into the park. And absolutely, I don't think the team here would be turning away opportunities like that should they come along in the future. But it sounds like you're supportive of this. Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Andy.
Thank you. My question is very similar to James's comments. This is a fantastic scheme, and I really hope it does get off the ground and gets the lottery funding. If for any reason it doesn't, though, do we have a plan B of how we can, either if we have to scale it down, keep it going in some form while we build up and get more funding for the future?
Rachel.
Yeah, it's a good point, and you know, we have maintained and sustained a relationship with Peak District Mosaic, you know, between funding pots and between funding rounds, and continue to build that partnership working and that legacy. So absolutely, we would continue to do that. We've been very successful, and Peak District Mosaic have been very successful through this process in reaching out to other organisations to get match funding into this, which have been really fantastic, and really lots of organisations have been very forthcoming with their support for this, including the Foundation, the Peak District Foundation and others, the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Foundation as well, and others. So there is already a bit of sort of money in the bank, if you like, that I think we could continue to look to use if we weren't successful with this, how that might help us bridge the gap and get onto a next pot of funding. But yes, there's absolutely that ambition, and I think we're very, the partnership is very solid in that support in terms of how we move forward and continue to build on the legacy, even if it was the legacy of the development phase and we don't get the delivery phase.
Thank you, Andy. Are you willing to second this? Thank you. Excellent. Any other comments or questions on this item? Yes, Ruth Swetnam.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Yvonne for just giving us a little bit more background there. As part of my prep for this meeting, I did actually go and have a really good look at your website and to the Mosaic website. As a fairly new member of the board, I wasn't so familiar with the work. And so I have a question really about aspirations for the future. Obviously, I'm very keen it continues. It's a really interesting and really important piece of work, actually. You mentioned that necessarily it has focused quite a lot on South Yorkshire and obviously our big urban communities there as Sheffield and Rotherham. As somebody who comes from Stoke-on-Trent, which is on the other side of the park, we've got Derby as well. I'm just wondering, you know, what our aspirations might be to actually work with communities who are not just in the north of the park. Stoke-on-Trent is one of the most socially economically deprived areas in the country. And Derby is better off, I suspect, but you know, we've got diverse communities in those cities who I know through my work at the university in Stoke. the Peak District is like nirvana. They would never think of coming here, and I know that's an important part of your work. So, yeah, just if you get the money, you know, have we got aspirations to perhaps just broaden this out geographically? Thank you.
Rachel, that goes beyond Peak District Mosaic, but maybe if you could briefly explain what we're doing more generally about sort of access beyond the South Yorkshire side. But Ruth, it might be useful for you to have a sort of chat to Rachel and the team outside to understand our wider engagement plans and policies. But do you want to say something briefly here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as Yvonne said, the sort of, you know, the bulk, if you like, has been that South Yorkshire, but absolutely we've made good inroads in the other areas that you're talking about. So there was groups from Manchester. We've got really good links into Manchester historically as well, with Peak District Mosaic and champions that have been previously trained. So that it's enabled us to reconnect with those. We've made some really fantastic connections in Derby through an organisation called the Evergreen Collective that we've not worked with before, and that was part of the development phase that we've worked with them, and that's a really new positive connection for us in that area. We have got some good connections down in the sort of Stoke area that we want to build on and work on. There was some training done, it kind of fell a little bit, unfortunately, with COVID, with training through the Southwest Peak project that Peak District Mosaic were involved with, and Yvonne may want to say something more on that, but reconnecting with those communities as well. So absolutely, our ambition is you know, that we bring as many communities as possible and absolutely create that ring where we can, and where we've kind of got projects like this that enable us to do that. Absolutely, that kind of finding those different communities and bringing in, connecting with organisations in those areas has been an important part of this project. So yeah, we'll absolutely continue that.
Yeah, Yvonne, do you want to just add a word or two?
In terms of the Stoke-on-Trent, we've got connection with Stoke-on-Trent. We've worked with an organisation there who support refugee and asylum seekers, and we had a project whereby we had the Peakwise people, and there were champions who have been trained and working with the National Park staff to become champions. So we have connection in Derby. Not only the organisation that Rachel has mentioned, but other people has come forward. So when we are recruiting champions, it's not just going to be a South Yorkshire. It will go out to these people that we've engaged with before, where we can recruit people to become on the programme to be trained as champions. Thanks.
Thank you. We've had a mover and a seconder for this item, so unless there's any more comments or questions, I'd like to put it to a vote, please. All in favour? Any abstentions? Anyone against? I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel, and have a good Christmas. I know it's a while away yet, but we won't see you. Thank you. And could I ask Sue Fletcher to join us as Head of Landscapes? Is that your title, Sue? Head of Landscape and Engagement. It says Head of Landscape here. Right, thank you, Sue. This next item is Environmental Land Management Landscape Recovery Pilot 2023 applications. So can I ask you to introduce the item, please? And there's a couple of updates to what the papers that members have received. So Sue will talk about those before we discuss it.
Thank you, Chair. So this report basically seeks member support and delegation for acceptance and spending of the funding, if offered, for one or both of the two, let me get this right, Environmental Land Management Round 2 Pilot for Landscape Recovery projects. Morridge Hill Country is one and White Peak is the other one. Now, members have probably noticed it is a fairly long recommendation one. I did try and make it a bit simpler. In essence, it does just seek member support for the acceptance of the funding if offered and to delegate the arrangements for how that funding is spent to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Chair or the Vice Chair of this committee and the Head of Resources and Finance Manager. There is one amendment, suggested amendment to that we actually take out the reference to the Head of Resources and Finance Manager and we replace that with the Chief Finance Officer. Just in terms of where the staffing situation is at the moment, that would cover it. The reason for this ask is basically the timescales around the application timetable. So DEFRA will be making it, or have actually made a decision, but then it moves into an enrolment period, and then they're expecting it to lead to a contract with DEFRA, and then actually to start very early in 24-25. So that would be really difficult to go through that process. So that's quite a substantial ask of members. The update that Janet referred to is that on Wednesday, as part of a raft of those government announcements, DEFRA confirmed that 34 of the project applications have been successful, one of which is Morridge Hill Country. Unfortunately, the White Peak one was not successful at this stage. However, it is fantastic news that Morridge Hill Country is one that's got through this initial stage. I do need to highlight that this is just stage one. It then would move into, if members support it, would move into the enrolment phase, which is regarded as the next step in the selection process. So there are a little bit more to go through before we get there. But ultimately, if we get through that process, as highly beautifully demonstrated by the previous report, during that development phase, the whole project is then worked up, and then the aim is that it would move to a bespoke delivery contract with DEFRA for up to, or at least 20 years programme of activities. So just the background I think I've covered quite fully in the report, so I won't go through that, just touching on the agricultural transition and the environmental improvement plan, and the fact that the landscape recovery is the highest level of these new environmental land management schemes, about that longer term landscape change, and very much about blending public and private money. I think it's just worth me mentioning and highlighting the focus for this round, and that is around net zero or carbon, protected sites, so sites of special scientific interest, habitat creation, nature recovery, but also linking in with positive community benefits. We've highlighted some of the access opportunities, and continuing food production. It is about working very closely with the farmers and land managers. It's about accessing greater reward for the public goods that are being delivered, and again that blending of private and public money. Ultimately, it's part of looking for that sustainable farm business model. And Chair, I would just like to just pause here and just give thanks really to all the staff, the range of partners that have been involved, Natural England, the Wildlife Trust, farmers and land managers, for both applications. It was really from a very sort of, decision to go for it, an enormous amount of work went into developing these applications, and they are quite ambitious. And I've got a very helpful, I think, farmer quote, which really struck a chord with me. At one of the meetings, a lady farmer said to me, she said, gosh, it is so very difficult for the team that are doing this to share what the project is when it's not yet been developed. So it's been a real challenge, and it is only a very sort of, it's a suggestion at the moment before we would go into a 2-year development phase. And I just wanted to move on briefly just to touch on Appendix 1, the Morridge Hill Country one. That's based on land owned by the National Park Authority, Staffordshire Wildlife Trust and the Ministry of Defence. At the moment, land managers, owners and farmers have signed up covering an area of 2,663 hectares. There is still an ambition to get that to more like 3,500 hectares, but again, we'll have to have those discussions with DEFRA. And the aim basically is the classic bigger, better, more connected natural landscape, and develop private finance access for family farms, using Pump Farm as a demonstration farm. And again, members might remember that lovely tour in September where we went round Pump, and actually, perhaps not all members, but I did sort of begin to show that map about developing this landscape scale project at that time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sue, for that introduction. Members, questions, comments, please. Simon Thompson.
A couple of questions, if I may. Why did the White Peak project fail, and are there any lessons to be drawn from that? Because that does seem to me to be an extremely important project that we should be pursuing, perhaps by other means. And also, just although the funding is clearly separate, I presume that that the Morridge Hill Landscape Recovery Plan will be sort of joined up with the Warslow Countryside Stewardship Plan that we're just about to discuss in terms of project management. So although presumably there are separate reporting requirements to obtain the funding, it will be joined up so far as the way that we manage the project is concerned.
Thank you. Very pertinent questions. So in terms of why was the White Peak bid not successful? So far, we've only been provided with fairly generic feedback. So one of my tasks will be to go back and seek more detailed feedback. However, I do think when you look at Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, you can see the difference in the contiguousness, is that a word? Contiguousness of those landscapes. So the White Peak, it was incredibly ambitious, and the team led by Rebecca Newman did a fantastic job. They got signed up from over 50 farmers, 4,500 hectares, but it was much more scattered. So that might be part of the problem. The ambition might have been part of the problem, and perhaps we didn't have as many carbon facts and figures for that one as we did for the Morridge Hill Country one. But that's my sort of feeling at the moment, but I will be hoping to get more detailed feedback. However, there are learnings, and I think one of the things we might choose to do is to keep some level of momentum going with that group of farmers, with an eye on to the proposal for a third round, or there may be other sources of funding. But I think, again, there's ways of doing that through other farmer groups as well, but we'll need to keep some level of momentum going. And that one was very much an application on behalf of that whole group of farmers. So that's the response to that. In terms of the Warslow Moors Estate and the Countryside Stewardship Agreement and the Capital Works, that's actually part of the point of the project, about how you clearly blend that public money that comes through those national schemes and new sources of private funding. Chris, member we've got at the back. Chris, you might want to add more to that. Or you might not.
No, it doesn't. You're in trouble. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Simon. Charles.
Yes, you said 34 had been approved. You'd said 34 had been approved. Out of how many? Do you know? Because that might help us understand why White Peak was not approved.
I don't actually know how many were submitted in the end. I am aware that DEFRA were expecting about 150. Their original forecast was that they would take forward 25. They've obviously found more funding, and that's gone up to 34.
Thank you. And there is another one that's gone forward in the Peak District. You just want to mention that, even though it's not under our management.
Yeah, there is one that's been put in and has been successful as well from the National Trust for their High Peak estate.
Can I?
Yeah.
So I don't know whether the recommendations need to be amended to reflect the update, but I'd be happy to move them. I just think it'd be great if an opportunity to progress the White Peak scheme comes up. So I'm all in support of trying to keep it moving forward. And I kind of, there's a bit of me that hopes that the reason wasn't for the scheme, but just because of how many applications there were, and maybe a bit of a fair divvying up across the country, perhaps. But I hope it comes to pass. In terms of the recommendations, I wonder whether or not is the scope to do a pre-approval so that if an opportunity does arise in the future, you can just get on with it.
Sorry, pre-approval for what?
For the White Peak project.
Yeah, I think I don't know the answer to that. I think we'd have to look at the delegated authority rules, and
well,
but this covers the delegated approval through this funding stream. So
So, sorry,
I
are we
don't- I
keeping
don't
the
know, I think we-
recommendations as they are?
Yeah, I
then?
think we
and
can't.
then that kind of puts it on the
I
back
think it's
burner.
something that can I suggest the officers look at and bring back if appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah. Sue, you're
Yeah,
going to tell me something different, aren't you?
Well, no, I think the same thought ran through my mind, and I dismissed it really because I thought a year is quite a long time. Things might change quite substantially. I thought it would be really neat to get this recommendation for both and look to resubmit the White Peak. Things are moving so quickly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think it's probably better to be prudent and stay on the side of the approach. Thank you, Charles. And you've agreed to move the recommendations, and I'll note the amendment that we put in there. Ruth, did you have? Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So I've had a mover and Ken, and then
I
Simon.
was just second the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Simon? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So can we just reiterate the recommendation? The first one, I'm not going to read it all out, but we have changed Head of Resources and Finance Manager to Chief Finance Officer, and the rest stays the same. So we've had a mover and a seconder. All in favour, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I agree with improved as well. Sue, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, and I'm really hoping that it goes forward from here. And do keep us posted. But thank you very much. Thank you. Can I ask Chris Manby now, please, Rural Estates Manager, to come and present the next paper, which is Warslow Moors Estate Countryside Stewardship Scheme Capital Works Grant Offer from Natural England to enhance habitats on 7 areas of moorland on the estate. We have catchy titles, don't we, to these items? Reminds me of being an academic when we used to have really catchy book titles. Thanks, Chris. If you could just give a brief introduction and then we'll take questions.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, there are 19 separate blocks of moorland on the Warslow Moors estate, which amount to about 785 hectares, about 2,000 acres, which that's about 40% of the estate, and all those moors are within the Leek Moors SSSI. Since the acquisition of the estate in '86, the authorities gradually worked towards the transformation of the moors from traditionally managed grouse moors to diversify their management so they will eventually meet favourable SSSI condition. It's been a long-term plan for such transformation and takes many years, if not decades, to achieve. The introduction of cattle grazing on the moors was the most symbolic change that the general observer would have noticed, but much less visible work in habitat management has been continually ongoing over the years. Since 2020, the scale of the positive interventions has dramatically increased with the fantastic financial support of Natural England, the Environment Agency and the MOD. 12 of the moors have had extensive habitat work carried out, including re-wetting, sphagnum planting and other crucial restoration work. A total of £560,000 of grant has been spent on the work. The potential offer of grant from Natural England, as described in this report, is a final piece of this jigsaw to transform the management of the remaining 7 moors on the estate, and it is obviously recommended that we accept the grant when hopefully it's offered in the next few weeks. I pay tribute to my colleagues in ecology, particularly Hazel Crowther, and also to Kate Williams of Natural England, who has been so supportive in championing the need from funding for MOD, from Natural England. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So this is a capital grant from Natural England, 100% costs covered. So any questions or comments, please? Simon. Thompson, sorry.
Fully supportive. Just a couple of questions, if I may. The target on slide 23 in our pack talks about a 2,878 tonnes net increase in carbon emissions. I assume that that is a reduction in net emissions from the current level. In isolation, that target sounds a bit peculiar.
That's in the carbon.
But that's in yes, it's in the management plan. You've got the objective 2, and then the target is a net increase in carbon emissions. But that must be a smaller number than the current net emissions. I'm making that assumption. It would be nice just to clarify that in the target itself.
This is at the bottom of the first page. Target by 2028 there'll be net increase.
Well, just to be honest, I've just lifted that out of the National Mark Management Plan.
Sue, can I ask Sue Fletcher to comment? Is that?
So this is about the difficulty. There's so much carbon being emitted from moorland and poor conditions.
Yes.
The only way it can be presented is in that net reduction of emissions.
So it would be nice then just to put what the current emissions are in this target, so that it's clear that the trend is improving, because in isolation this looks like a net increase.
We can take that back. I think those figures have been produced by North for the future, so we'll have to take that.
Yeah, I think we'd need to look at what's written in the management plan there, because I think, as Sue says, this has sort of come from the management plan, and maybe it looks odd out of context. Charles?
I've picked up the same point. I just wondered whether or not it was how it had been worded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe reducing the net increase.
Well,
Exactly.
Yeah, these are the words that are in the management plan.
Okay, well, it might be worth just
I
thinking about that.
think what we'll do is we'll sort of look at how we represent elements of the management plan and ensure they're contextualised properly in reports going forward. But thank you for picking that up.
My second question was, do we have a date by which we expect the SSSI on our land to reach a favourable condition?
Chris, can you answer that?
No, we don't. It's a sort of ongoing monitoring by Natural England. At the moment, all the moors are in what they call favourable recovery condition. None of them are yet in favourable condition, but I'm told on several of them we're heading nicely towards them now. But as I said in the introduction and the report, it's a very long-term thing to actually get to those targets. But hopefully we will, at some point in the next 10, 15 years, I would hope. Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. Now, you said you were you're happy with this report, so you're happy to move it. Any comments, questions from any other members? Okay. Can I have a seconder then, please? Thank you, Charles. All in favour? And anyone against? Any abstentions?
I've written it wrong.
Okay, thank you. That's all in favour. Sorry, thank Phil.
Just looking at the management plan here, the management plan is a net decrease, and I think it's just a typo in the report.
Sorry.
Okay, a typo.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So can we note there's a... Yeah, thank you. Can we note there's a typo in the report? Thank you for the clarification. But those recommendations have been moved and seconded and approved. So thank you very much, Chris. If we could move on to item number 8, please, the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan. And Brian Taylor is here to present this item. Now, I hope you all read the 120-page Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan as part of this next item, or at least looked at the nice pictures. It's very impressive. It's long. Lots of lovely photographs. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sue. You listen to okay. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan concept flows directly from our National Park Management Plan again, and the role that lead partners can play in driving work that support the core aims of the plan. So it's a specific action of the management plan for the Chatsworth Estate to pilot the development of a first whole estate plan for the National Park. And Chatsworth have quickly grasped that nettle and have been working with a company called Rural Solutions, who are experienced in this kind of planning, over the past year or so to draft the plan and undertake quite an extensive stakeholder engagement process. So they had workshops on the estate and representations were invited and made directly to the estate and collated all of that. And that's in addition to significant direct input from the National Park Authority's officers. So the appendices are included to highlight the detailed comments made by the authority and the significant efforts made by Chatsworth to respond to these and reflect and align with the management plan aims and objectives. So at a high level, we can say there is now close alignment and commitment from the estate towards the management plan, and we're really pleased with that as a first outcome. We already work closely with the estate on land management, biodiversity and heritage work, as well as through individual planning applications, and have for a long period also held annual liaison meetings channeled through what's called the ITEMP approach, which is an inheritance tax exemption management plan. So a management plan approach has to be done by the estate anyway. That's often focused specifically on individual building projects and land management projects. But the purpose of the whole estate plan is to consider planning and management at the whole estate scale. And we're talking here about the core estate of Chatsworth Park and the villages included within that. And in that sense, it drives a wider scope of interests, such as our thinking on biodiversity net gain, carbon reduction, sustainable travel. It might not cover everything in detail or go far enough for some, but we are pleased and we have seen it as a very positive step forward. So in this respect, we think it's a new direction for the authority, working in partners in quite a progressive and different way. The next step is to continue with that work and that connection into planning policy through the local plan review. And taking a lead from the South Downs National Park, we've seen ways in which policies can be framed that include reference to whole estate plans specifically, and giving scope in the plan to recognise the role of estates through such estate plans. And then as a part of that process, ultimately, if the authority is satisfied that the whole estate plan can also meet local plan criteria, then we can accept that document as being material to future projects and planning decisions. So material planning consideration, in effect. So on that basis, we do recommend to members that the authority endorses the plan as our message of support and satisfaction at this stage, and continue working to embed this style of plan further into our planning policies. We have used this term endorse rather than adopt at this stage because we're not adopting the plan and we're not held to it in that sense. And I think those kind of stages will come as we move through the local plan and create criteria to really look at how it interfaces with our policies. So this term endorse is to very much be a supportive term at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. And just to reiterate, endorsement doesn't mean we approve everything in the Chatsworth plan. It means that we're supporting the approach that's being used in the partnership approach of how this is progressing. But it's not, it will evolve, and our relationship with Chatsworth will evolve, but also hopefully provides a sort of a starting point for us to start having conversations on this basis with other larger estates within the National Park as well. So with that in mind, I'm opening it to members for questions and comments. Yeah, Patrick, I'll come to you if I need to ask voting members first. So James first. But yeah, I've noted you want to speak, Patrick, don't worry.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I move the recommendation to endorse. The devil is always in the detail of this, isn't it? I mean, the document as it stands, for those who have seen it, is a very colourful, expensive and well-presented document. I'm not quite clear what the final plan would be. Is that the final plan? It is. So the devil is in the detail, and there are some laudable aspirations contained in there. And I think if one takes a couple of examples, the first is days to stays, which is an aspiration. Now, I'm not quite clear whether Chatsworth mean days visits, translating day visits, of which there are many, many, many on their site, to overnight visitors on site. Presumably it means within the area. So for that to happen effectively, you need to know the motivation of the visitors in the first place. You're not going to get a day visitor immediately to stay overnight. So I think there's some finessing of the action behind that aspiration. It's a laudable aspiration, but how are you going to do it? And secondly, I very much welcome, Brian, the comments that you have made in response to the plan regarding sustainable transport. There is a bigger game at play here at the moment. Chatsworth are but one of many drivers to high visitation in traffic, in private transport. And for it to be effective, and their aspiration to be effective, they need to be playing into the wider game. And I think that needs to be brought out here. We do have a sustainable transport officer now, and we do have a sustainable transport approach, and they have been party to that approach thus far, but I think they can't do what they're doing alone, and they need to be part of that programme. And finally, I do recall the management plan aspiration says that this should be an exemplar for others to follow. I've heard what you said about establishing planning practices and approvals, but actually a management plan such as this, a whole estate management plan, there are a few estates that clearly are not as grand as is Chatsworth, but the Haddons of this world. What are the lessons that this particular document can give to others who have estates to manage, who have similar pressures, although perhaps not as intense, but similar pressures? And I think we need to, if we haven't made that comment, that was certainly an aspiration of the management plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to comment on those items where relevant?
So yeah, as we say, there's clearly scope for a lot more detail and follow-up in project areas. So we have got the Sustainable Travel Officer. You know, we were pleased to see there's references in the action plan to creation of an off-road cycle route between Hassop and the estate itself, and quite broad, but you know, a statement in there about moving fossil fuel-based transport towards reduced carbon forms of transport. So, you know, not specific, but it is a definite commitment to go further with that, you know, in terms of reducing cars, you know, private car use. You know, that's an important ambition to state. So it's at that level it kind of sits at, but we have to go pick up on that, don't we? We have to take the hook and develop that. So I think the lessons piece is good. You know, prior to the management plan, we'd already done a round of discussions with 5 or 6 of the main estates around the national park and set the scene for this. So including Haddon and Tissington and others, National Trust as well, actually, at an estate level, and said this is a direction we wanted to be going in. So now we've got this model. It does tell us things about process, about, you know, structuring documents, about how we want to see alignment with the management plan, and the kind of areas I think would tick boxes for us as well in that. So I think we've learned things from that we can then pass on. And I think, you know, Phil, I know, has got a series of meetings with landowners and managers. I think there's one coming up with Haddon actually, where we can now refer to this directly, and if we can have follow-ups on that basis. So I think that is helpful.
Do you mind if I come back on?
Okay. Yep.
I accept all that. Nobody is like Chatsworth in this area, and it's easy to say, well, they would do that anyway, wouldn't they? So there must be some tangible things from within this for us to use as exemplars. I don't think the planners itself, if you put that on Tissington's doormat, they would go, well, hey, look, you know, this is a whole different ballgame. I think there are what we must challenge them to do, and I'm sure they will do, is to bring out things that can be absorbed and taken on board by other practitioners as well. But that's the point. But thank you.
Thank you, James. Noted. Simon Thompson, please.
Very, very similar comments to the comments that James just made. I mean, I think we should endorse the aspirations set out in this plan, but we should be pressing for much more specificity and quantifiable time-limited targets where possible. I mean, particularly the ambitions on net zero look pretty underwhelming, and I think on biodiversity net gain as well. So I understand this is a relationship-building exercise, but given the huge resources that the Chatsworth estate have and their ability to influence other smaller, less well-resourced landowners, I think we should just be encouraging them to be more ambitious.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Noted. Brian, do you want to make any response to that other than yes?
Yes, but...
oh, yes, but, okay.
So, obviously not our plan.
Yeah.
You know, we're not in control of it in that respect. We're trying to influence and direct and take people on a direction of travel. In that respect, I think it starts that journey. But, you know, we will have to look, I think, at the management team as to how we can follow up in those specific areas and put them to task, yeah.
But it's as part of the sort of relationship building, as part of, you know, the management plan, partnership work. Charles.
Thanks. Well, I'm happy to support the recommendation to endorse it. I think my caution would be if it progresses to another stage and we're maybe looking to incorporate a policy within the local plan. So just picking up on James's comments about days to stays, within the Chatsworth plan, it makes it clear that that's about converting premises on site and putting more like glamping on site. So I'm fine with the aspiration, and within their objectives, they do sort of like say where suitable, where appropriate. The danger would be that if it progresses to the next stage, if we're not very careful, that might open a door that allows Chatsworth to do a lot more than elsewhere. And if it's not managed properly, that might create issues. So if we are looking to modify the local plan to include it, I think that real care needs to be taken with that. But it could be a positive way to do that as well. It really depends about what really does happen, doesn't it? So it could be a great example of for lots of other estates to do things in an organised way. I'm fine with endorsing it. I'm just a bit worried about if there's another step forward, that's maybe where the problems come. Their fourth aim is access, engagement and learning. I don't know what level of engagement they have with Mosaic, but they appear to be opening the door for that kind of partnership. So I would take them at what they're offering and try to make as much out of this plan as possible.
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. I think, Brian, can you particularly comment on the local plan and the planning side of things here?
Yeah, I think there's really interesting planning policy point here, you know, that if it goes further than the local plan in certain areas, you know, how far do you take this idea of a material planning consideration? You know, in itself, it shouldn't trump or harm the national park or trump other policies. So I think there's a construct that we'll have to look at as well within the plan that would say, for instance, glamping and camping pods and other things that we bring to committee. There's policy behind that, you know, and there's expectations about where and how that's done. If Chatsworth would want to do things in a different way, are there other benefits that the plan at a whole estate scale is bringing in terms of net gain that could actually say, when considered in a broader strategic sense, we can see the plan and see the logic. So I think there's still other questions there about how we construct the plan to make that work, but you would want to see it actually encouraging net gains for biodiversity and carbon reduction at the same time. And, you know, can you actually use that as a reasonable exception to other policies in the plan because it's doing other things? So, you know, I think that's further learning that we're trying to take from how other national parks have done that, and how you could make the plan as a whole work. Very good question.
Thank you. But I think you can reassure the committee that this doesn't give Chatsworth the licence to just get on with these things just because it's in the
No,
plan.
well, I think that's where we need to track it through the local plan process, and have a policy framework that says we will approve this if it meets these criteria. So there's still another process to follow.
I'm working through my list. I've got Ken next, then Andrew Gregory, then Yvonne, and Patrick, you're still there, don't worry.
Thanks, Chair. Most of the comments I was going to make have been made eloquently by James and particularly by Simon. I think I welcome the plan. I think we should be endorsing it. I'm pleased to see the degree to which it now aligns with the management plan. But as has already been said, it comes across as heavy on aspiration and light on what the outputs and outcomes are that are going to be achieved. So I think whilst I recognise that it isn't our plan, it's Chatsworth's plan, and that we're asked just to endorse it, I think it's, in terms of being exemplary, it perhaps indicates ways in which in future where we have commented on this, we have changed some of the content through our commentary, so it's not entirely Chatsworth in the sense that we have had an input. I think we should be noting ways in which the delivery of the plan can be improved as an exemplar, if you like, or as an indication of how we approach future processes with other estates. I fully accept it's an iterative process. This is the first. Hopefully it won't be the last, and it will improve over time. But I think it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be encouraging people to indicate more robustly quite what it is they expect to achieve through the production of these plans, which I think is a good direction. It's the right direction that we should be taking with dealing with the major landowners in the national park. But like everything, we're learning as we go. But I think we need to note what we should be learning in the context of our own responsibilities.
Thank you, Ken. And it's not just the what, but it's also by when as well, timescales. Thank you, Ken. I don't think I need to come back to Brian on that. Andrew Gregory, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I mean, I'm completely in favour of the report. I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair. I think my only thoughts were around perception. I picked up on the point about we're endorsing the proposals from Chatsworth. I'd be interested to hear what Patrick, as Chair of Planning, thinks about that approach, because obviously not everyone will necessarily always agree with everything that Chatsworth is proposing, and I'm just conscious of making certain that in this process we continue to preserve the independence and integrity of our planning policies and process, taking into account what's been said about incorporating into the local plan as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Brian, do you want to come back any more on above and beyond your response to Charles?
Just to clarify that, I mean, it has no weight in planning terms at this stage, and that gives us the space to actually think about how that can work. So, there is experience in other national parks of making it work. And actually, when talking to other officers that have facilitated it elsewhere, actually planning was a minor part of it. Actually, it was much more helpful, for wider projects and other initiatives. So, but we obviously do want to make that planning piece work.
Okay, thank you. Yvonne, and then Patrick.
I wanted to respond to Charles when he mentioned about Mosaic and Chatsworth. We've had a good working relationship with Chatsworth in the past. Just before the pandemic, the education officer was made redundant during the pandemic. But things have slowed down since then. Recently, I submitted an application for a conversation group from Sheffield to visit. But in the past, we've had up to 150 people from Stoke, Manchester and Sheffield who visited. It's mostly around Christmas time. And we've had a group of 40 carers from Tinsley, the other side of Sheffield, who have visited with their family to the Stickyard, have an understanding. This was during the celebration of Capability Brown. So it's been a successful relationship with them, and building new relationship with the new officer that's there now. Okay.
Thank you, Yvonne. So Ruth came in, and then it'll be Patrick, and Charles, you want to say something else as well? Sorry, Patrick, you keep going down the list. So Ruth, then Charles. Okay, Ruth, then Patrick, then Charles. Okay, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I have some sort of hidden disquiet about why we need to actively endorse this. Andrew, I think, put his finger on it a little bit for me about my concern about our need to retain the independence of our planning, and I'll be very interested to hear what Patrick has to say about this, and us seen to be in bed with one of the biggest landowners in the national park. So what I want to understand is, what are the institutional risks for us as the Peak District National Park to be seen to be actively endorsing it? I absolutely get all the good stuff in it, and I totally understand, you know, there's lots of great relationship building going on, and there's been and the feed into the local plan. But I do have some disquiet, because I also agree with Simon that it isn't very clearly stretching, and there are some things about it you also raised about sustainable transport. So it's very glossy, it's very long, but what are the benefits to us in endorsing it, and be seen to publicly endorse it, even though we may well support many of the activities that are listed in it and really want to develop it as an idea for the Peak District National Park? And what are the potential forward-seeing risks to our institution, and how the public see us endorsing a big landowner who then want to do, inevitably will put in planning applications? So that, I think, is what I would like to just really understand. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you. Brian, so it's really, you know, what are the benefits of having a whole estate plan, and what are the risks to us? They do put planning applications in regardless, by the way. So it's sort of understanding opportunity. Brian, do you want to start, and maybe Phil might come in afterwards?
I think, Chair, it's probably the point you've just made, really, that, you know, we're coming from a point of partners doing their own work anyway, right across the piece, and there's a lot of private land ownership in estates and farms. You know, our role is to be advocates and to influence, you know, and use the control where it's there. But before that, to try and guide people, a bit like in a pre-planning sense, into the right context in the first place. So it's a dragging in a direction of travel type process to get people more aligned with us, you know, and I think that's the point of this document, that feels it's doing that, and clearly it's not, there isn't enough detail. We've talked about that, but you know, I think that's its role. It's an influencing role, and it's to bring partners closer to us in a really good level of you know, hymn sheet it's very similar. And we see that as a helpful step, but it doesn't take us all the way, clearly.
Thank you, Brian. Phil, do you want to come in?
I just would say that we want whole estate plans. It's in our management plan to have whole estate planning for estates to take that holistic approach. So I think we really do welcome this approach and endorse this approach, as we would with any other estate taking this approach. Now, as it happens, the way that Chatsworth have approached this has been really engaging with our officers, and they've been really open, they've taken on feedback. There are, of course, in any plan, in any estate of that size, there's going to be disagreements and differences of opinions, and anything will have, in planning terms, will have to come through the right planning process. But they are a really important partner. The management plan is a partnership plan, and I think it's, you know, I would really welcome the members endorsing this partnership plan and the messages that sends for the way we want to work with Chatsworth and other partners.
Thank you. Patrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also having problems with this word endorse, because in the normal use of English, that implies we're agreeing with everything that's in the plan. And a lot of it we can agree with, and a lot of it's superb. I mean, some of the work that Chatsworth has been doing is going to go on into the future, and nobody in any way would wish to hold that back. But I am struggling a little bit with some of the things that the plan doesn't say, and with the way in which this plan relates to future planning policy. I'm not even quite clear when I read the Chatsworth website whether this is, in their view, the final plan, or whether the plan has to be worked on a lot more to be got to another stage, because it invites comments and so forth on the website. But it seems to me that the way this plan is put together, excellent as much of it is, and useful as much of it will be, particularly for the Chatsworth estate, I'm having some real difficulty translating that into something that we should attach to a local plan and say, this is a document that we should have regard to for planning policy terms. Partly because if you miss things out, for example, is that something that you... What is the implication of that on planning policy if you say that's part of... You're having regard to that for planning policy? I'm totally confused by the process and how that fits into the process. And I could see how you might extract from this headlines which would say, these are the things that we will have regard to for planning policy. And then you would have to analyse those and work out whether you really can have regard to them or not. For example, James referred to the Days for Stays policy, which is a policy of a large number, as I read it, of building and barn conversions for holiday accommodation. Now, that carries with it a number of implications for the authority, its policies, and also for local communities. Alongside that, there is an objective which says that they will support thriving communities by allowing people to occupy existing housing stock. I'm not clear from this whether some of the existing housing stock is also available to be converted into Days for Stays. There's no analysis that I can find in this document, and I'm sorry, I've tried to read it online. I found it very difficult to follow online, but I've got a gist of it. There's no analysis or understanding that I can see of what we have set out in our management plan in terms of what we mean by thriving and sustainable communities and what those communities need. Now, it's perfectly possible to say, okay, that's an omission and therefore it's in the air, but it's also an omission which has an impact if you look at it in terms of what's going to happen to our villages. We're going to hear this afternoon in the local plans group about what's happening with population changes. I've no idea what the Chatsworth villages will show. I do know that locally, the changes of use of various buildings away from residential to holiday accommodation has caused a great deal of difficulty and resentment. That appears to be implied by this plan. And if you endorse that, what you're actually, I think, effectively saying is we agree with it. Now, if I thought this plan was at a stage where there's going to be more discussion, that we were going to really get to grips with some of these issues and get clear statements about them, I'd be a lot happier. But as far as I can make out, this plan may be the thing that will stay there until such time as we see whether we can, and if so, how we can, in some way cross-reference it to the local plan. I really have some difficulty with parts of this. I liked Simon's wording. To endorse is to say we agree with it all. To actually say that we endorse some of the aspirations or the direction of travel or the approach is a better way forward than saying we actually endorse it, because I don't think there's any agreement in my mind, any doubt in my mind that to say you endorse is the same thing as saying we agree it entirely. And I don't see the difference.
Yes.
I mean, we're opening this up here now, and I think it's quite right that we do so. What we can't do necessarily is endorse all the outcomes from the stated intent, because we don't know what the outcomes are going to be, nor do we know the direction of travel they're going to take to get there. It might be counterproductive to sustainable communities, it might be counterproductive to a range of things. And I think we're perhaps looking for a different set of wording here for this. We are actually, to endorse means to publicly state. That's what it means. And so, you know, I think we're not in a disagreement to their aspiration, we're not, but we can't really see the end game to some of this. And why would we at this stage? So are we endorsing, as Patrick has perhaps implied, the approach to Chatsworth whole estate planning with the expectation that we will be involved, but we will also see some of the granularity that and the impacts of the actions as we go through time. Because, you know, if we're endorsing their document that we've seen in all its splendour, there's a lot of there are many unknowns to the implications of delivering that. We are certainly endorsing, I would say, their approach.
Can I, as chair, can I suggest an amendment to this recommendation? Am I allowed as chair to do that? Okay, thank you. Because we see under the second bullet point under key issues, it says that Chatsworth Estate has requested the authority authorises the whole estate plan. Endorsement does not commit the authority to any course of action. It is a public declaration of support for the plan and the aims and objectives it contains. I'd like to propose we amend the recommendation to say to endorse Chatsworth whole estate plan, recognising this does not commit the authority to any course of action.
That covers it to a certain extent, but it makes us sound a bit mealy-mouthed.
Okay.
And
can I ask for a proposed alternative recommendation? Charles.
Yeah, thanks. I can understand why perhaps maybe they're not as ambitious as they could be, but part of that, if it was me, I probably wouldn't be, because I'd want to make sure I can deliver what I'm saying, and this is the first iteration, and it looks like it'll evolve over the next 15 years. I think the reason that we've got endorsed down is back to the whole point about the local plans. So in on page 32, bullet point 5, it's got that reference to the local plans and endorsed plans. We've clearly got concerns around the word endorsed. We could just accept it, and that accepting that plan doesn't really put anything more around the fact that we've received it. I think there was some comment about the estate manager coming to speak to us, and I'd be happy to hear more. I think rather than them come here, I'd rather go there, and maybe they can talk us through what are some of the things that they're looking to do on site. But I think I would say that the mood of the committee perhaps is that the concerns over endorsing. We don't want to say no, but we don't want to.
Give carte
we don't want to go too far either, so perhaps accept the report. But I don't know if that will cause. I don't know what the wording in our management plan is for how we encourage people to submit whole estate plans and what we do with them. We might get tied up in our own.
Yeah, I'm going to ask. Thank you. I'm going to ask Ken to come in, and then Andrew, and then Charlotte.
I just wonder, Chair, whether we should be noting the Chatsworth whole estate plan and endorsing the whole estate plan process.
Okay.
It gives us an entree into future ones.
Yeah. Okay, Andrew.
I was conscious that as I'd moved the recommendation, it probably would come to me to suggest any changes. And so as a lawyer, of course, I started getting into some mealy-mouthed thinking and wording. I just wondered whether if we said that the committee acknowledges and accepts the approach adopted by the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Charlotte?
Sorry, as another lawyer, I was going to say much the same, really.
Good.
So,
Okay, so you're supporting Andrew's
just said,
suggestion.
yeah.
Thank you. Simon?
I do think that's a bit too mealy-mouthed. I mean, I think we should be supporting the principle of whole state planning and stating that we've enjoyed the engagement that we've had with them so far and look forward to working in partnership with them as they develop and execute their plan.
Okay, that's that's sort of not really a recommendation, that's a statement. We're trying to rewrite a recommendation in a P&R committee by committee. What I'd like to do is actually go back to Andrew Gregory, who moved the recommendation in the first place. And can you reread that, please?
Well, as I said, my proposed revised recommendation would be that we acknowledge and accept the approach. We acknowledge and accept the overall approach of the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan.
Okay. Acknowledge and
accept the overall
not
approach.
Not support.
No. With the direction
Okay.
of travel.
And Ken, what was your?
It was just a note to the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan and endorse the process.
Okay. Phil, can you help?
You know, given, you know, I'm the person day to day in some ways who deals with Chatsworth and has a relationship and so on, I wonder whether we can't kind of combine the two. And actually, what we are endorsing the approach. I think there's a problem with endorsing what's in the plan because we don't know what the outcomes are. But I would, if we can, really like to... So if you could kind of just change and put actually to endorse the whole the approach to the whole estate plan in some way without endorsing the plan, I think that might be a nice way of doing it.
Because it is the approach we're happy with. We don't want to be hostage to fortune to action and detail within it. I think that's what we're saying. James?
I was really going to say, we want this to work.
Yes.
And for this to work, the relationship with Chatsworth has to be a positive relationship. Otherwise, they could do this and not to our... We need to be in a position to influence and continue influencing. So I think what Phil has suggested is acceptable.
Yeah. So what did you suggest? to endorse the approach
I think
to
it's
the
just to endorse the approach of to the plan.
So modify the recommendation to endorse the approach to the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're endorsing the approach, but not necessarily the detail within it.
Yeah.
So, because we can't see it, and it means we're then not hidebound by committing to particular actions going forward. But the approach of the partnership approach and involving the net carbon and the whole estate approach, I think we do as a committee endorse. I think we can endorse the approach.
To make it more positive, you could add at the end of that and look forward to sort of working with the estate to further the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and continued working and continue working in partnership with the estate. So, how are you doing there, Ruth? Can I suggest, and what's procedure? Does Andrew Gregory have to?
Yeah, because he moved the original recommendation and is now proposing.
So, Andrew, what's the amendment you're going to propose? This is fun, isn't it? You need your mic on.
I'm happy to change to it so that we say endorse the approach
to the Chatsworth
Whole Estate Plan and look forward to continuing to work in partnership with the estate.
Yeah. Okay. Ruth, have you got that?
Do you need the look forward to in it?
Continue. Yeah. Continue to work in partnership.
Continue to, fine.
Okay, can I ask Ruth to read that amended recommendation out, please? This was a 15-minute item, by the way. Got that wrong. No.
Thank you. I think you're saying you want to endorse the approach to the Chatsworth Whole Estate Plan and to continue working in partnership with the Chatsworth Estate.
Yep. Yep.
Working in partnership with the Chatsworth Estate. Okay. So, Andrew, are you willing to move that recommendation?
Yes, I'll move it.
Can someone second that recommendation? Thank you, Andy. I think we need to go to move this item on. Can I ask everybody who's in favour of this recommendation? Is anybody not in favour of it? Are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So that's passed with a revised recommendation. Thank you very much. And thank you, Brian. Can we move on to item number 9, please? Christine Moores for the Future is here for this item, which is confirmation of previous delegations to Moores for the Future partnership. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Good morning, members. In some ways, it barely needs an introduction to this, really. It's just as a result of the job title changes and other changes, it means that a lot of the reports that I've brought to you recently, well, over the past 2 years, where we've asked for a delegated function, the delegated function now in the recommendations of those reports doesn't make sense because those job titles don't exist. So we've simply put a new description of how that delegated function works to represent the updated jobs in the structure at the moment. Just as a very quick reminder, this is fairly essential and really useful piece of delegated function because the people that we work with who often require quite quick decisions to be taken which don't fit into the normal cycle of committee meetings, but they are still treated with a lot of looking at by the Chief Finance Officer, that was, by Finance and Legal, basically. So each time these come in, they do require me to go through quite a lot of scrutiny in order to make sure that the requirements have been fully met. The requirements of standing orders and legal requirements have been fully met. So that basically is what we're asking for, and I think there's an appendix of the reports that have gone through recently. There will be 2 reports coming to the next programme and resources meeting in February, asking for very similar delegated function for 2 of the matters that we've got where we've not got all the details yet, but we need cover to allow staff to be able to continue working. So we need to know that we're going in the right direction, basically, which that gives us. That's it, basically.
Thank you. So this is a sort of procedural matter, really, that we've changed names, we've changed job titles. So this has to come to us to reapproval of the wording. Ken?
Move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Andrew, second it. Charles, are you itching to put your hand up to... Okay. Does anybody have any comments before... No. Can we ask for who agrees and approves this item? Okay. Anyone not in favour? Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, members.
Thanks, Chris.
The final item is for information, which is the annual report of the due diligence panel. So this isn't, it's just to note these items. James Beresford, I think you're the member on the due diligence panel. Is there anything you particularly want to draw our attention to at this late moment in the meeting?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Chair. Thank you. So,
I'd just like to correct that. No, thank you, Chair.
thank you. And so, can I have a mover for these recommendations? A seconder? Thank you, Ken. All in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? No, thank you very much. And that's the end of the meeting. And can I wish you a happy Christmas or festive season or however